Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I'll be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we're going to be talking to Mr. Mike McNeil, who's the CEO and co-founder of FleetDM, and we're going to be talking about open source device management solutions. But first off, let's say hi to Mike. Mike, how are you today?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing
Cool. Hey, so whereabouts are you?
I'm in the weirdly cold Austin, Texas. We had our yearly snow today.
That's it. So what is it now? It's February, so it still is technically winter, I guess, right? But do you guys get much snow down there?
We didn't until last year when we had sort of a once in a century shut down everything event for like a week. Everyone lost power. It was intense.
Yeah, that's when all the windmills froze and everybody was saying that renewable energy is never going to work. And then the backstory came out that they were actually shut down in advance, and there was all kinds of things going on. And yeah, it was a kind of a messy time. Hopefully you didn't lose power this time.
No, this time I think we were more prepared. The hot water heaters wrapped up outside. I think we're gonna be all right.
That's so funny. Yeah, because up here, I mean, I'm up in the Seattle area, the Northwest, and I'm looking out the window here, and there's still snow in the mountains, and so we just kind of take it for granted that things are going to freeze up. But I guess in Texas, it doesn't happen that often, or not traditionally anyway. Hey, so Mike, you are the CEO and co-founder of FleetDM. Before we talk about what exactly FleetDM does, maybe you can kind of set the stage and talk a little bit about what device management is. And then we'll talk about open source device management.
Yeah, so device management really is this problem where and not everybody has it at the scale that a lot of fleet users have it, but everybody kind of has it, right? If you have a family, you have multiple computers, you got laptops, you have iPads and iPods and iPhones and Android phones, and you have like a bunch of stuff. You might even have servers. We call all those things devices, even the servers, and that's device management. You need some way to keep an eye on these devices, make sure they haven't been infected with malware, vulnerabilities, make sure they're up to date, and kind of just see where they're at, if they're online, and what's going on. A little creepy in the family setting, but if you apply that,
well, it depends. I have 3 boys, right? So I like to be the big brother, kind of keeping an eye on what's going on. But you're right, yeah. In the corporate situation, it's a little more acceptable, I suppose, right?
Right.
Yeah, and device management, I guess depends on the tools, but I've seen large companies where, like if you talk about Microsoft Intune, for example, and Autopilot, where you can deploy a device remotely, so the person receives it, they open it, and then it's configured in a manner that matches their profile. You can, if the person leaves the company or they lose the device, you can do a remote wipe, things like that. I'm not saying that FleetDM does all that. I'm just saying that in general that those are some of the things you can do. Now, and I mentioned the Microsoft solution, and there are other solutions out there. What's the advantage from say like a proprietary solution versus open source?
Well, with a proprietary solution like Intune or Jamf, right? You have kind of an operating system specific outlook. So you're looking at maybe all your Macs. Maybe you're using like DEP to get that same kind of experience you just described with Intune working on Mac. Maybe you're using Intune and you're doing it the Microsoft way for your Windows machines. And you probably have a few Linux workstations that you're like, it'd be really nice if we could actually let people use these again.
Yeah. What's going on with these machines, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, with the proprietary tool, you get more depth for sure, right? Absolutely. Like if you have a $1 billion company investing all of its time in features for Mac, you're going to have a great product for managing Macs. But what we've seen is that the world of device management is bigger than just this MDM piece. Like there's some gaps in what you can get out of a OS specific product. And especially when you kind of look across the wide angle lens at like all the different operating systems and types of devices you need to support.
Okay, so is there a scenario where a company could use a proprietary solution and then supplement that with an open source solution?
Yeah, and I would say most of the companies that I've spoken with are doing something like that. Like I don't think I've yet, there are some companies that really are aspiring to get to full open source, but I would say most folks are using at least some vendor proprietary software in addition.
Okay. And then are there any advantages, and maybe you can, you give some specific examples of, why open source would, how would it be more advantageous? I guess you already mentioned in terms of the breadth of the types of devices to cover, but does it give you any additional kind of functionality or signal that that other tools wouldn't?
Yeah, and maybe more than signal, think like data and tickets. Um,
Okay.
so if you're looking at a product, not even just Fleet, like really anything that leverages osquery, you're kind of looking at like a data fountain, right? You've got all these different events happening on the computers. You have state, like what apps are installed, like what's even what software is vulnerable to those apps, like what software is unused, and there's maybe like stale licenses that we don't need to be paying for. Um, Serial number, like disk space used, knowing whether things like actually were patched. We think telnet is disabled. Is it really disabled? Being able to see if your installs worked. So let's say you take a tool, like one of the more powerful and larger scale MDM platforms, right? Like Jamf, and you were to roll out a patch. How do you really know that it worked, right? Like the tool you just used blasted out the software to all the computers it manages, but you don't really have sort of like a external way of being like, did that really happen?
And then how does OS query help you with that?
Yeah, so osquery is basically a way for all these computers to phone home.
Okay.
So it's sitting there as an agent. It's all open source, runs in the background, and it tracks one of like, at any given moment, there's 300 different tables in osquery that are all keeping track of state and events happening on the computer.
Okay. So when you're, I mean, so your solution is I would, so should I say it's built on OS query, or it heavily depends upon OS query, utilizes it? Um, do you, when you're, if you're the chief security architect for an organization, do you get to pick which items are queried? Is it just a generic set, or how does that work?
Yeah, so let's say you're using osquery just by itself, right?
Hmm.
Um, Maybe you put together a team, maybe you have 3 or 4 security engineers, maybe you kind of upskilled one of your security analysts and got them some code literacy, and then you brought in some folks from elsewhere. Um, and you're getting together, everyone's really excited, you get osquery deployed using something like Chef or Ansible. Maybe you start with the servers, that's a pretty common path we've seen. You get osquery out there, and then you realize like, okay, I got all these devices ready to phone home, so where are they going to phone home to? And then you start building the server, and that's Fleet, basically. So at that moment, you can either build all this stuff from scratch, or you can go do what a lot of engineers do, is give it a Google, right? And go see like, is there an open source thing that already does this? And there's a few options. Fleet is among the most popular of them. I think at this point is the most widely adopted.
Okay. Well, that actually brings up an interesting question, because your company's relatively new, and you receive, I think, about $5 million investment from some impressive investors. I think one of the co-founders of GitLab, and also the VC firm CRV invested. Why, what was your pitch to them? Why Fleet DM versus somebody else in the market?
Yeah, I think the story really is a lot of it, right? So we've been a company for only a year, but the actual history of the company, or the project, really goes back, almost half a decade earlier. So it started with there's this guy, Mike Arpaia at Facebook, who was working with Zach. This is back in the old days before it was, before it was Meta, and they kind of had this idea, right, which was, we have all these tools we could go buy, right, and we could try to like figure this out with our vendors, or we could think of these devices like a database, right, and we could send SQL queries to them get responses from them, and then like basically construct our security and IT program any way we want. And osquery was hot, and it kind of has gone through the trough of disillusionment a little bit, and now it's kind of just become like a pretty widely used tool that it's really great for seeing like what's really going on your servers and on your laptops. So that's kind of the backdrop, right? And then Zach and Mike Arpaia worked together at a company called Collide with Jason Meller, where they built Fleet, the open source product, back in 2016, 2017. Built a great product, got some users. Collide ended up realizing that for their goals, what they needed was a hosted SaaS product, right? And they wanted to kind of do more user focused security. So they took that, ran with that, and kind of left Fleet behind. They rebuilt their new product as a different thing in a different language. So there was Fleet kind of all alone, and Zach ended up leaving Collide and sort of working on it, did some consulting for a year or two. And then when we met in 2020, it was really like, wow, so there's all these amazing users of Fleet, right, that are kind of using a relatively mature but kind of only barely staying together product in terms of the time and focus that needed to be spent on it. And so taking that, funding it, kind of throwing some fuel on the fire and bringing some UX and developer experience improvements, we found that suddenly there was a lot of pent up demand for using the open source products and having support and having some new paid features that we added.
Awesome. So how much can you share in terms of, because you said there was a lot of people already using the solution, what kind of numbers can you share?
Yeah, so just using kind of a combination of our anonymous usage analytics and then the customers that we're working with today, it's somewhere north of 1.65 million devices that are enrolled and being managed by Fleet.
That's impressive. That's impressive. And a lot of MDM solutions, well, in security solutions, they will talk about kind of they will bake in or work side by side with incident response, incident detection and response tools, or they have those features baked in. And you're querying devices. But if a device is compromised, do you get any kind of proactive alert, or is it just because you set up an automated query that it's going to send back a signal that would kind of flag something that's going on? Kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, I mean, so a pickaxe in the hand of an expert miner isn't a really effective pickaxe, and I would say that's kind of what's going on with Fleet right now. We are definitely moving more towards making, Fleet's really good at letting you see what's going on, and it's getting better at telling you what you need to do. So as far as like getting a proactive alert, one thing you can do in Fleet is you can set up a policy. So if whether this is like part of your compliance program, or even if it's just a real-time detection that you want to create, Fleet does a great job at that. You basically type some SQL in, you structure it so that it's a yes or no question, and then you turn on reporting. And if you want, you can also turn on automations, and it'll automatically create a ticket for you in Zendesk, Jira, or you can use a webhook and get to ServiceNow. Right now, webhook is how you do all three of those things, and we're working on actually shipping Zendesk and Jira integrations this quarter.
Excellent. Walk me through a typical deployment or engagement, and I'm talking about from the very beginning. I mean, you mentioned that somebody goes to Google, they're looking to see if there's already a solution out there, they get pointed to you, and your solution is maturing right now, and especially in terms of the UX, it sounds like makes it more user friendly. But just kind of walk me through that process.
Yeah, so this was also a question that we dug into a lot early on, because we wanted to build open source device management. We wanted something that would go top to bottom open source, not just the agent, but like the whole server. And we knew we wanted to run the company a lot like GitLab. We wanted an open core business model. We wanted everything we did to be public as much as conceivably possible, like even the handbook, even doing our S1 filings, like all that stuff. And so when we first got in and started building the actual company together, it was like, okay, how are these people even finding us, right? And like a lot of A lot of the time, I would say most of the time, it starts where you have the decision to DIY, right? Maybe not your whole stack, like not your whole security stack, not your whole IT stack, but just kind of because you're having to wire up the tools together anyways, you're having to hire engineers. Maybe you're using a tool like Tines, but those workflows, even though they're drag and drop, still have to be maintained by somebody, and somebody who understands the decisions that are being made. So usually in that moment, you're like, well, we want to use osquery. It's open source. Our security engineers like it, and we don't really have a place for that osquery data to accrete to, like to get streamed out to wherever it needs to go. Like maybe we have Splunk or Elastic or Snowflake, or Sumo Logic or Panther that we want to actually do the detections, but we just need some way to get the data.
Right.
Like if you're familiar with, are you familiar with Segment?
No.
So in the marketing stack, there's this thing called segment.com. It used to be called segment.io. And its whole deal is you could take like a script tag, right, and drop the script tag on your web page, and it would just kind of collect the raw events, like the identity and the tracking information for all of the actions happening on the site. And then all Segment was at the beginning was basically kind of a little router. Like you would log into Segment and you could turn on or off these switches, and I could have it go to, Kissmetrics or Google Analytics or whatever. A lot of how people use Fleet starts there.
Okay.
Kind of this way to collect the data and then send it where they want it to go.
Excellent. Okay, and then as I'm assuming that you monitor who your users are, and is it the like a freemium model? How are you making money?
Yeah, so it's an open core business model. So what that means is there's a free and open source version of the software, which anybody can go grab from GitHub. And then there's also another version of the software that anyone can also go grab from GitHub. All of the code is source available. All of it's inspectable and modifiable. You can request a feature or you can do a pull request, even for the paid features. And that version costs $1 per device per month. And that's, you can either buy that self-service on the website and get a license key with a credit card, or you can reach out to us, and for any sizable deployment, usually that's what folks want to do because they want a demo and the whole procurement process and that jazz.
Yeah, so that was my next question was, would they reach out to you, or do you sometimes say, hey, you know what, we just had this Fortune 500 company download our code. Are we, should we follow up with them and say, hey, you know what, why don't you tell us a little about what you're trying to do, and maybe we can kind of coach you along the way?
Yeah, well, we're careful there because this is a community project kind of from the beginning. So we don't want to abuse our power, right? Like we are just starting to collect people's emails if they want to give them to us.
Okay.
And we don't, if you go download our code, like we have no idea. You can turn off usage analytics, and even if you have them on, we still don't know who you are. We do have all the standard kind of marketing tools that you need as a company like this to understand, like, hey, like that contributor is from, I don't know, from Salesforce or something, and like they're running like hundreds of thousands of devices. Like that's helpful to know, so that when we do have a conversation with them about roadmap or whatever, we're just like in Slack talking, we can be like, hey, I noticed you have a lot of computers, everything going okay?
Right. Hint, hint. Hey, so and then do you have bundle on like consulting services, or do you have any kind of partner ecosystem that you've developed yet?
We're just kind of starting to explore that. So there are some folks who bundle Fleet, like Security Onion is a kind of security suite where Fleet is one part of it, and that's just the free version of Fleet. And we do have some budding partnerships with some other young companies, but we're not, right now it's mostly just kind of the standard package. And we do discounts for early commits and for folks who are really wanting to be design partners. We're kind of getting past the design partner stage a little bit, but we're still small enough that we're able to work with people on roadmap. As far as consulting, that's something that we've explored bundling, but it's not something that we really do as a revenue source.
Excellent. Hey, and one thing you mentioned earlier, I think that you alluded to the fact that you could use Fleet DM or Fleet to to monitor like what's actually being used on a device and whether it's just sitting there. If you have a license that's being kind of sitting there dormant or not used, and one of the terms that we use is TCO, or total cost of ownership. And if you can take a look and say, hey, you know what, you don't need half of these licenses, or you can negotiate your licensing in such a manner that allow you to kind of optimize that. Is that something that that Fleet is being used for as well?
It's something that people use direct queries to ask today. So you think of like
Okay,
a data spyglass or like a telescope. You can use Fleet to ask like pretty much any question and get an answer in like less than 10 seconds. So if you can structure it with SQL in any of those hundreds of osquery tables, like you're pretty much good. Now, if you want to be able to see that at a glance without having to even mess with the SQL, that's where we've been adding these features kind of bit by bit.
gotcha.
So right now we have actually a pending roadmap item. We need to add a column in our software table that shows you the last time the software was opened. So it's just a UI change, kind of waiting until we get to it.
Totally makes sense. So, what's your biggest challenge right now?
Oh, that's a good question.
It took you a long time you're thinking about it. So, I mean, it sounds like no big challenges.
Well, there's a lot of with growing a company that
Mhm.
it's constant learning. I think hiring has been hard a little bit to find folks who are available, but at the same time, we've had like being open source. It makes it a little bit easier than it has been in past lives for me. So we've had some really really amazing candidates. We just got someone from the OS Query core team, so um,
Do you
that was
find
huge for
do you
us.
find when it comes to hiring that a lot of people want to work more as a contractor because they want to do multiple kind of gigs versus somebody says, oh, full time, that's because I've just worked with so many developers, engineers that they have their own business, but until that business gets up and running, they do want to work on these different gigs and work on a retainer and things like that. And it's been challenging in the space that I've been in to find people who want to work full time for somebody. If you're, especially if you're SME, if you're, Apple, for example, you've got a little bit more gravity to pull people in. But I mean, are you seeing that?
Yeah, I mean that's how I got started. I
Okay.
became an entrepreneur I was working part-time, starting a little like website building business, never meant for it to take off. And then uh I got a 50K deal, and I went and I talked to my boss and I said, "Hey, can I go part-time?" And they were like, "How about you go no time?" And that's when I became a full-time entrepreneur.
Awesome. But you're seeing other people out there with the same kind of mindset.
Yeah, and we're down for, if there's talent, and if there's true genuine interest, honesty and transparency with someone, like we'll work with whatever situation you've got. I mean, we're an all remote company. Full time is full time. What matters is your results. I
Hmm.
think the important thing is that Fleet is what you're thinking about when you wake up in the morning. And sometimes that comes from people who have like really, really high talent and we've just met. And sometimes that comes from people that we've gotten to know a little bit more slowly over time. And maybe we've kind of, we've seen examples of how they can be really awesome in the community and what they've done. Maybe we've tried them out as a contractor for a while. Maybe they're a little bit earlier in their career, but they have a lot of excellent drive and high trust. And
Hmm.
some of those people have been the best additions to our team.
Excellent. And dealing with security, do you have like a sweet spot in mind in terms of the types of organizations? I should say the size of organizations that you want to engage with.
Yeah, so we just rolled out the ability to purchase licenses online. So up until recently, if you had fewer than 100 employees, there wasn't a lot we could do for you just because of focus. That's solved now. So the whole thing is self-service. Support is all you can eat, no matter what.
Hmm.
So those folks are signing up. I think last I checked, there was like $200 in surprise ARR from that demographic. But yeah, mostly it's folks with more than 1,000 employees.
Okay.
And we do have some really awesome customers who are maybe between 500 to 1,000, but 1,000 plus is where we can really add the greatest benefit. Basically, whenever you're at the stage where you're hiring security engineers.
Right, right. And typically at that size, from what I've seen, you have more than one, and somebody focuses on device management or at least partially on device management, right? So, um, and then but when you talk about companies that size, there's a lot on the line in terms of their security posture, trying new solutions. Do you have any obstacles in terms of creating trust? Because they're going to have to trust, your solution, the community, et cetera. Is that an issue at all?
In some ways, if they trust osquery, they trust that because he wrote osquery, right, with
Right.
Facebook. So some of the trust is already there. Um, I mean, an area where I think we need to continue to get better is like we just shipped some vulnerability management features, right? It's kind of like, hey, we already have this software data. Let's just integrate with NVD real quick, right?
Hmm.
And kind of like get that hooked up. And so one of the advantages of rolling out a release every 3 weeks is
Hmm.
that we have a constant parade of new updates and iterative small improvements. So that's been working great. On the other hand, it means that you have to update a lot. So one thing we've been trying to get better at is making sure that when we do a release, it is rock solid. We're always showing fresh data. And with an existing code base that's been around for a while, that's been things are pretty mature, but things are also like, we've definitely found some bugs that have been there for a few years and we've been cleaning those up. So if you're someone who's used Fleet like 3 years ago, I think you'll find a vastly improved product.
Very cool. Well, hey, it sounds like you're onto something. You've got obviously a huge runway. I mean, devices continue to explode, and they're kind of the bane of every large organization in terms of whether it's BYOB or excuse me D. Or, where my mind's at when I say B. There, I already told you I'm almost quitting time here. But BYOD or if it's a company-owned device, it's a challenge, right? And so how do you manage that? And if you can be part of that solution, that's awesome. Anything else that you'd like to share with about your roadmap for this year or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of exciting stuff coming this year. I think right now what's happening in Q1, we already talked about. We've been collecting and shipping data, right, from these devices to lots of different places, your Splunk, your Snowflakes, etc. And now one of the things we're doing as of the tail end of last year is shipping tickets as well. So being able to get those into Zendesk, Jira, ServiceNow, or anywhere you might want to hook up a webhook to
Hmm.
key to us, whether that's because of a policy violation, like if you don't use Zoom at your organization, somebody and maybe 3 people install Zoom, you want one ticket about that, about all 3 devices, kind of batched up, easy, ready to use. So that's coming. We're also shipping Fleet Desktop. So imagine a system tray icon that gives you a view into here's what my organization can see about my computer. They
Hmm.
can see I have Age of Empires 2 installed, right?
Yeah.
And then you can also then do some self-service, right? So for at least certain basic things like getting updated to the latest operating system, it gives people at your company a way to participate in getting your security posture applied.
That's something that I haven't heard much of. And companies always preach that, security is everybody's responsibility and that everybody's at the front line of security, right? And so, but at the same time, I haven't heard of organizations giving a tremendous amount of visibility in terms of, what the company can actually do with your device and, what they're looking at, what they're monitoring. Nor, I mean, typically that's in an HR document or policy, right? I mean, it says, we have access to this, that, or the other, but I haven't seen any type of dashboard on the at the device level. Nor have I seen where where companies are pushing updates to the individual and saying, hey, it's kind of your responsibility. And I'm not sure how that all plays out in the scenario you talked about, but it is kind of a different paradigm than typically, because typically organizations will tell everybody, hey, security is everybody's responsibility, but you've got a couple engineers in the on the IT team that that's their job, right? And they are kind of sensitive about that. But it's interesting. So you're seeing more organizations kind of pushing out to and just being more transparent?
Totally. And it's not about limiting what IT and security can do. And
Hmm.
even, in an audit situation, there's times when you do need a bit of secrecy, right? And totally understandable. This isn't about taking power away from IT. It's about making it so they don't have to be the bad guy.
Right. Yeah. Totally agree. See that. Hey, if people wanted to learn more about this topic in general, I mean, what resources would you recommend, and where do you go to kind of stay, up to date on what's happening in your space? And then, of course, we'll come back to talk about Fleet DM in a second.
Yeah. So, I mean, podcasts, like, there's so
You
many podcasts.
mention your favorites. I don't look at any podcast as a competitor. I think we're all in the same community. So if you have your favorites, please mention them.
Yeah. Well, actually, I really enjoyed the one with Times that y'all just did. I was
Oh
listening
yeah,
last week.
yeah. Owen's he's a great talker. He's the information he shared was very informative. Yeah.
Totally. And then the Detection Challenging Paradigms podcast is pretty good. Panther's Detection at Scale is a great one. But one thing, actually, I'll share that this is not to necessarily bring it back to Fleet, but just because this has been an area of focus for us.
Mhm.
You know, we've been getting to the stage where it makes sense for us to do our own internal security stuff. Like, we've been dog fooding the transparency thing, so I can go look and see, like, I always pick on this guy Ben on our team. Ben Edwards. He has so many games. He makes a great demo to be like, here, like, check this out.
Right.
And so there's something inherently interesting about other people seeing or what other people see about your computer. It's almost like it's your clothes, right? It's like what you're wearing. So anyways, like, we've been doing that, and we've been kind of like documenting what that's been like setting up security ourselves. And we just put that in our handbook. So on fleetvm.com, you can go to /handbook, and you can see our internal handbook that we use to run the company. Everything from like how we respond to folks on Twitter, like how we do our customer support, to how we run security. So you can see we just went through all the CIS benchmarks. We've been doing how did we get from default Google Workspace to being set up good enough for like a seed through Series A company. Yeah, so we're investing a lot of time in that. I'm hoping that can become a resource for exactly the kind of thing you're talking about.
Awesome. And you already mentioned your website. That was gonna be my next question. You mentioned that. I'll put it in the show notes. Hey, Mike, really enjoyed the conversation, and you can tell that obviously you got a huge runway out there. Devices are not going away, and everybody's scrambling to figure out how they can optimize their device management. Wish you and the Fleet team a great 2022.
Yeah, thank you. Stay warm up there.
Thanks.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.